Antisocial personality disorder. Society thinks this is the most dangerous. Movies, series, documentaries, all obsessed with the psychopath. Wrong. This one's on the lowest rung for one simple reason: ridiculously low body count. Antisocial personality disorder. The clinical category that includes sociopaths and psychopaths. Yes, they exist. Yes, some kill. But let's look at the real numbers. Less than 1% of the population has ASPD. Of those, only a tiny fraction commits homicide. We're talking about maybe a few hundred deaths per year globally directly attributed to this disorder. Compare that to what comes next, and you'll understand why Hollywood lied to you. Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, the Zodiac Killer, all of them together don't come close to the body count of a single disorder your grandmother probably had, and nobody dramatized in any movie. ASPD is theatrical, flashy, makes headlines. A psychopath kills 30 people and becomes a Netflix series. But 30 deaths? That's statistically irrelevant when compared to disorders that kill millions silently. The reason we're obsessed with psychopaths isn't the real danger. It's the spectacle. It's the illusion that evil has a face, has a pattern, can be identified. Curious how we focus on the rare, obvious monster while ignoring the invisible killers operating inside us, right? This disorder is at the bottom of the ladder, not because it's harmless, but because its destruction is microscopically small compared to what comes next. Paranoid schizophrenia. Schizophrenia. Society sees it and thinks. Violence, danger, unpredictability. Reality? People with schizophrenia are far more likely to be victims of violence than perpetrators. About 1% of the global population has schizophrenia. Approximately 24 million people. Hollywood wants you to believe they're potential killers. The data tells another story. The homicide rate committed by people with schizophrenia is marginally higher than the general population, but still absurdly low. We're talking about a fraction of a percentage. The real body count of schizophrenia doesn't come from external violence. It comes from suicide and neglect. Approximately 5 to 6% of people with schizophrenia die by suicide. Others die from untreated physical illnesses because delusions prevent them from seeking medical help. They die from exposure to cold because voices tell them shelter is a trap. They die from malnutrition because they believe food is poisoned. Schizophrenia kills through the collapse of the interface with reality. When your brain can no longer distinguish real threat from imaginary threat, you stop trusting basic survival mechanisms. And society? Society throws them on the streets and pretends they don't exist. Funny how we transform devastating brain disease into horror movie villain, but ignore the thousands dying alone under bridges. Estimated annual body count: tens of thousands globally. We haven't even come close to the top of this ladder yet. Bipolar disorder 1, the neurological roller coaster that kills at both extremes. Approximately 46 million people worldwide have bipolar disorder. And here's the nightmare. Both mania and depression are lethal, just for opposite reasons. In the depressive phase, you want to die and have the intention. In the manic phase, you don't want to die, but you act like you're immortal and end up dying accidentally. Mania isn't being happy. It's genuinely believing you can drive 200 km/h because the laws of physics don't apply to you. It's spending all your savings in 48 hours because I have a foolproof plan. It's not sleeping for 5 days because your brain is convinced sleep is for the weak. Kurt Cobain had bipolar disorder, Amy Winehouse too. The list of dead artists isn't coincidence, it's statistics. The suicide rate in people with bipolar I is 20 to 30 times higher than the general population. Between 25% and 60% of people with bipolar will attempt suicide at least once in their lives, and about 15% to 20% will die by suicide. That's not counting accidental deaths during manic episodes, car accidents, unintentional overdoses, extreme risk-taking behaviors. The cruel irony. Half the time you want to die. The other half, you act like you can't die. In both cases, you end up dead. Estimated annual body count: hundreds of thousands globally. And we haven't even reached halfway up the ladder. Substance use disorder. Addiction. Society calls it choice. Neuroscience calls it brain hijacking. And the numbers? The numbers call it silent genocide. Substance use disorder isn't liking to drink or using drugs recreationally. It's when your reward system has been completely reprogrammed. Dopamine, serotonin, all the neurotransmitters that should make you seek food, sex, connection, now only respond to the substance. You literally can't feel pleasure in anything else. The drug doesn't make you happy. It makes you less miserable for a few hours. The numbers are apocalyptic. In the United States alone, more than 100,000 people die from overdose annually. Globally, conservative estimates point to more than 500,000 direct deaths per year related to substance use. And that's not counting indirect deaths. Traffic accidents, liver disease, HIV from needle sharing, suicides during withdrawal. And here's what makes this disorder especially lethal. It kills democratically. Doesn't matter IQ, social class, education. Philip Seymour Hoffman had everything. Talent, money, access to treatment. Died of overdose at 46. Because addiction doesn't negotiate, doesn't accept logic. It's a neurological parasite that only stops when the host dies. The difference between medicine and poison? Just the dose. The difference between use and addiction? Just time. Annual body count. 500,000 direct deaths. Millions of lives destroyed indirectly. And we still haven't reached the top. Eating disorders. Anorexia nervosa, bulimia, binge eating disorder. Society romanticizes them as self-esteem problems. Medicine recognizes them as the psychiatric disorders with the highest mortality rate that exist. Let me repeat that because you probably didn't believe it. Eating disorders have the highest mortality rate of all mental disorders. Higher than schizophrenia, higher than bipolar, higher than severe depression. We're talking about a mortality rate of approximately 10% for anorexia nervosa, which means 1 in every 10 people diagnosed will die directly because of the disorder. And death comes from multiple directions. Cardiac arrest, because the heart literally doesn't have enough electrolytes to function. Organ failure because the body started digesting muscle, including heart muscle. Suicide because the mental torment of seeing food as the enemy is unbearable. Karen Carpenter, the singer, died at 32 from heart complications related to anorexia. The worst part? Society actively feeds this disorder. Fashion industry, diet culture, Instagram full of thinspiration. While other disorders are stigmatized, this one is partially celebrated until the point where the person collapses. Curious how the only disorder society applauds in its early stages is also the one most likely to kill you. Estimated annual body count. Tens of thousands of direct deaths. Hundreds of thousands of hospitalizations for medical complications. And the ladder keeps climbing. Major depression. The silent killer that kills more than malaria, car accidents, and HIV combined. And society still thinks it's sadness. It's not sadness. Sadness has a reason and passes. Depression is the systematic shutdown of the survival instinct. It's waking up and needing 40 minutes to convince your brain it's worth getting out of bed. It's looking at food and not feeling hungry. It's looking at people you love and feeling nothing. It's the brain saying with absolute conviction that you'd be doing the world a favor by disappearing. The numbers are terrifying. Approximately 280 million people worldwide have depression. Of those, about 800,000 die by suicide annually. And that's just what we can track. Doesn't count the slow resignations. Stopping medication for chronic diseases, neglecting cancer symptoms, driving recklessly without a seatbelt, stopping eating properly until the body collapses. Robin Williams had severe depression. Anthony Bourdain, the chef who traveled the entire world eating and laughing, hanged himself in a hotel room. Because depression doesn't care about success, money, or how many people love you. It's a neurological bug that convinces you the only rational way out is death. The brutal irony. The disease that kills the most is the same one society tells you to get over with positive thinking. Annual body count. Almost 1 million direct deaths from suicide, millions more from self-induced medical neglect. And we still haven't reached the top. Collective PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, but not the individual kind you know, the collective. When entire nations carry unprocessed trauma and it transforms into generational violence, PTSD isn't just the war veteran who can't sleep. It's Rwanda after the genocide, where an entire generation grew up with traumatized parents incapable of forming healthy bonds. It's post-World War II Europe, where untreated traumas created generations of alcoholism, domestic violence, and mass suicide. It's every war zone where children grow up with overstimulated amygdalas, unable to distinguish safety from threat. The body count is exponential because collective trauma doesn't just kill directly. It destroys the emotional infrastructure of entire societies. Parents with PTSD raise children with chronic anxiety. Traumatized communities develop explosive rates of addiction, suicide, interpersonal violence. Studies in post-conflict populations show that suicide rates remain elevated for decades after the guns fall silent. American veterans from Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan, more died from post-war suicide than in combat. This pattern repeats in every modern conflict. Trauma doesn't end when war ends. It just changes weapons. From bullet to rope, from bomb to overdose. War doesn't just kill on the battlefield. It kills for generations, silently, in dark rooms where nobody's counting. Estimated annual body count. Impossible to calculate precisely, but easily millions when you add up decades of unresolved trauma in global populations. Shared delusional disorder. Folie à plusieurs. The top of the ladder, where madness stops being individual and becomes ideology. Where a shared delusion kills not in thousands, but in millions. Shared delusional disorder. Technically, when a group adopts the psychotic beliefs of a charismatic leader, but let's call it by its real name, when insanity becomes mass movement. Jim Jones convinced 918 people to drink poison in Jonestown, not by force, by shared delusional conviction that it was the only way out. But that's amateur compared to real history. Hitler probably had severe delusional disorders. Stalin documented psychotic paranoia. Mao Zedong, delusions of grandeur that resulted in policies that killed tens of millions. And they weren't the ones who pulled the triggers or built the camps. It was millions of normal people who shared the delusion long enough to execute genocide industrially. Here's the terrifying truth. A single psychopath with ASPD kills maybe 30 people in their entire life. A leader with delusional disorder who manages to infect an entire population kills millions. Because the delusion becomes official policy. Genocide becomes bureaucracy. Madness becomes law. And it doesn't have to be Hitler. Modern cults, extremist movements, apocalyptic sects all operate on the same principle. A central shared delusion that justifies atrocity. The difference between crazy and prophet? The number of followers. The difference between mental illness and ideology? Just scale. Historical body count, hundreds of millions. When madness becomes culture, there's no body count. There's just history. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See in the next video, Healthy Narcissism. Let's start with the truth nobody wants to admit. You need narcissism to survive. Healthy narcissism isn't pathology. It's the foundation of functional self-esteem. It's waking up and believing you deserve to eat, deserve to be treated with respect, deserve to take up space in the world,